What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Real Reds Talk. This is your Thursday night transfer talk show with me, myself, and the ever-reliable Mr. James Rhodes from the Muppetiers. Make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel and check him out on X for trustworthy, regular United updates. I promise you on that one. James, first and foremost, how are we? And second of all, United in America at the moment. Are you been making the most of it?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I was able to get out for the LA game at the last weekend, which was good to go, good to see, a lot happening there. The hours are a little easier to catch the games at the moment. Otherwise, though, yeah, it's hard to travel around too much for me. It's all still, I can't take 10 days off or anything like that at this time to do all the games, but we got the one.
Yeah.
I'm happy about that.
What area is it you're from? Is it Colorado, did you say? I might be way off there.
Yep.
Oh, so
Yeah,
my memory serves right. So how far is Colorado to LA?
It's about a 2.5 hour flight.
Okay.
So it's a good 1,000 miles, 800, 1,000 miles, but that's normal here. But yeah. It's not like down the road,
Yeah, and a lot's been made about the stadium, and impressive. I don't know if you've been there before or not.
Very impressive. No, that was my first time going to SoFi Stadium there in LA. I mean, it was all impressive because it's not just the stadium, and that's, I think, an important part about it. And I have a similar, I'm from Chicago originally. They redid the stadium there, but it has a similar feel because it's kind of like in a park. And in this park, there's lakes and there's space and there's all this stuff around a stadium that makes it feel really nice, like a really nice place to go. And then there's venues and there's things to do and all sorts of stuff around it. So it's a really cool spot. And in LA, right in the middle of this giant city, it's a really cool spot. You go in and there's all this stuff around, and then you walk through parks and lakes and all sorts. And then the stadium itself is insane. I mean, it's like an open, closed door one, where it's got it's got a roof, it's got coverage, but then it's open on the sides, so you get like the natural air and all that stuff. It's not stuffy, but you don't have the weather kind of issues in the same way. It was just awesome. It's just a really, really cool place.
Yeah, I was very, very jealous of seeing all the channels over there at the minute. I'm like, oh my God, that looks absolutely beautiful. Do you think United might take some inspiration from that? I've seen quite a few things on that in a minute.
Yeah, well, I talked to some people, some contacts of mine at the club in person when I was there about wow, the fucking stadium,
Yeah.
and
in that exact
and
phrase.
It's that exact phrase, and it's like, okay, do you think United could take something from this? Like, is this what we want for United? And obviously there's differences, in terms of how you set the seats up and the atmosphere and things to be a bit different, but in terms of the overall amenities and all of the things that go with it. And I spoke with the club guys, I spoke with a lot of people, and certainly it's just the money. They want this. They want something like this. If they got to figure out the money, the way to fund it without it handicapping the club. But it's just the funding. But they want this. That is what they want. They want something really, really special, something new, something exciting, something incredible for United, which of course it deserves to be. It should be incredible.
Yeah, a team like Manchester United with the reputation they have, they should definitely have a stadium like that. So I'm interested to see what kind of model they go for. We're going to discuss pre-season, a couple of details around that, the injuries and transfers. I want to kick it off, though, with this Lenioro thing, though, James, because out for 2 to 3 months. Rasmus out for around 6 weeks, is believed. I'm curious to know, do you personally believe this will maybe push United towards more transfers in a more imminent fashion, or is that not kind of Ineos's model, kind of just be reactive because something's happened?
As much as a lot can be made of, accelerate the plans, things like that, the thing I would say is, one, I don't think that they've been slowing the plans down on purpose for any reason. They're not those type of people. They've been moving as fast as they'll work. And they're not reactive people. The thing about this project as a whole, speaking about this in the beginning of summer and leading up to summer, I kept saying, look, this is a 3 to 5 year project. This is a long-term plan. Honestly, you don't buy Lenioro for next season. I'm not saying you don't use him next season. I'm not saying he's not good enough. But that's not why you wanted him more than any other center back in Europe. It's because of what he will become what he will get to. You buy Joshua Zirkzee at his age because of what he will get to. You let Varane leave on a free because you don't want these older players in there, and you're trying to reduce the age and improve the long-term thing. All the workings that they're doing are for a long-term plan overall. And, on the one hand, it's like, it's 6 to 12 weeks, frankly. I know they said 3 months, and maybe it will be. Like, maybe they'll be really careful and keep him out for the full 3 months.
Because you
totally
look at
plausible.
James, it's like you don't want to rush them kind of injuries, do you? Because isn't it similar metatarsal? Didn't Lissandro do his metatarsal as well?
It did. He did. And here's the thing: he had surgery, and I think he was out 10 weeks. Yes. So it could be less than 12. Yeah. He was out again because the surgery went poorly, which is not something you expect to happen. Yeah. Unless you're United, but not in this case, right? Yeah. But so it could be sooner. It could be sooner. 6 to 12 weeks is the usual timeline, but you do want to be careful. It's the type of thing where there was sort of stress showing. If you kind of remember with Højlund's thing, he had a stress spot in his back, and that could lead to a fracture. There's similar things that can show up, and sometimes, like with the foot, there's nothing you can do about them because there's so many little bones and things like that. You could maybe see something moved a little, but you can't do anything about it. You just say it might get worse, it might not. We'll hope. If it does, then we end up resting and doing whatever repair we need to, which is what's happening now. It's not a big deal, this type of injury, and so I think part of the thing is, like, let's say they decided, for example, that De Ligt wasn't someone they really wanted. They're not going to sign him because he's out for 2 months. It's not going to happen. Yeah. That's not going to be the reason. I'm not saying they won't necessarily, make this move, but that's not going to be, but that's not going to be the reason, right? That's not going to be, the defining point behind it. The defining point behind it is whether they want him and whether it's at a price that they want, right? Not the injury. So I don't think it changes much, to be honest. I think where it does change a little bit, in the forward line, nothing at all with Højlund. You have 5 other senior players who are ready to step in. You have Zirkzee, you have Garnacho, you have Ahmad, you have Rashford, you have Sancho. You have all of them. That's enough for a few weeks, right? Because it's a short injury.
Of course, Bruno played there as well towards the end of the season, didn't he? So
Mason Mount can play in the front line too. You've got options. You've got a lot of options that you didn't have before. And you do have striker options. You have a striker. They were running out the false 9 last night. You would think that there's a reason for that, right? And it's certainly more in the vein of what Zirkzee brings to the table. So you'd think they're kind of prepping for, that's how we're going to start the season. Højlund's not here. Let's put this together. So it's a tricky question because I don't think it really changes much. They're not going to make significant decisions based off of short-term problems. I guess I'll put it that way. That's always been the theme.
Yeah. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because from last season, you sat hoping going into preseason, you're like, please, to God, do not pick up any further big injuries. And when you get one to a brand new signing and you get one to Højlund, you look pretty good. I know it was only 10 minutes and people say whatever, it's small sample size, but look like that, some of them.
It did look really good.
From Ruud was kind of rubbing off. Is this just a freak thing? Like, what is, I know it's almost $1 million question. I was saying on a live before, it feels like, I don't know if you ever watched Treasure Island, but the black spot that you get? It just feels like there's one on United at the moment, and I can't put my finger on what it is. Is it the intensity of the training? Is it like, what is it? Do you know?
So, yeah, look, I mean, I know. And here's the thing, right, is that it's one of those things with like statistics and all of that, because this could happen and we could go the next 2 months without picking up any injuries. You could get 3 in one game and none for 3 months. And it's like, Højlund's is pretty minor. He's had a couple little hamstring pulls. He's a young player. He runs hard. It's pretty normal for players of his age to pick up hamstring injuries. Like little ones. It's not a big one. And to be fair, he went down. It's 6 weeks for a hamstring is not bad, actually, especially if that's sort of the outset.
With hamstrings, certain grades of how intense they are. Yeah.
I mean, Michael Elise missed 6 months, came back, and he was fine, right? He missed a long time. He missed almost a full season with hamstring injuries kind of back to back. But there's a few things. Originally, last year, there were definitely concerns when Ineos came in and what they've been looking at about certain aspects of how the load management was done that were resulting in more injuries. There's certain aspects of the players coming back too early resulting in injuries. And I think that's why they're giving the long timelines now instead of nothing, because they say, well, if we say 3 months, we can stick to 3 months, and nobody's saying, why isn't he back, right? So they've improved on those things, but you have to think about it like it's not exact. It's never going to be perfect. You can't eliminate all injuries. You're never going to. Euros is a stress injury. They were already taking precautions. It happens. Højlund's little pull, his first game playing after being back from summer, that's kind of when you expect someone might pick up a little strain. Yeah. He ran so hard, I mean, he went 100% that in those 15, 20 minutes, you could tell. And it was kind of a collision injury too. It was when he was running into another player and then got his other leg stuck. Rashford last night gets stepped on. I don't think there's anything major in that, but there's nothing. It's just bad luck. He gets stepped on, right? I don't know what's with Antony. I don't think it matters particularly, but I don't know what the situation is there. But, it has mostly been things you wouldn't really put down to a big deal or much of anything, but just, a little bit of bad luck at the moment. And I do think over the course of the next few months, it will be lower for sure than last season. I mean, sure. By the end of the first month last year, we were missing like 5 starters. I cannot see that happening now. I mean, I really can't. Yeah. So, yeah.
Touch wood anyway. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of focus at the moment, don't they, on the centre backs and the attacking area. Yep. I actually agree. I think we're okay in attacking areas at the minute. We've got that many options, especially with the form that Ahmad's in at the moment. The midfield is something that I'm very interested in, and I'm kind of panicking a little bit. You'll know more than me, so you might not be as panicky as myself, but I'm looking at this thing with PSG and Ugarte, and they're kind of sticking to, we want to make profit on how much we spent. I think there's 50 million from Sporting or something along the lines of that. But now, apparently, are they open to a loan move with obligation, or is it an option to buy? What's the specifics around the Ugarte deal?
It's tricky, right? It's complicated because there's been so many conflicting reports on different things. My information on it, as I understood it, is that the way it was presented to United is that there would be some flexibility in this transfer. Yeah. Whether it's on a decent price or a loan plus a conditional obligation. And I think that can confuse the option and obligation aspect. Is there might be conditions to that obligation, playing a certain number of games, things like that, or a timeline where you only have till January to activate it, these types of things, or it can be renegotiated. There's a lot of ways that can go. But the way it was presented to, as I gather it, was that this is there's an opportunity to sign him here, and there's going to be flexibility in it. Part of that was predicated on PSG getting the replacement of João Neves in, which is now done. Yep. They have him. He's signed. And if you look at the fee, it's 60 plus 10 in euros. They're not going to ask for... It just doesn't make any sense that they're going to stick to a price that's higher than what they're paying for what they see as a younger and better replacement for a player that to them is excess to needs at this point in time. So, yeah, the way it was presented to me is there would be flexibility, that there was potentially the possibility of a loan plus obligation. I don't think it would be a straight option where United could just not do it entirely. I think there'd have to be something tied to that where PSG want to make sure they get something out of it. But also that there'd be flexibility in the deal. When you see those kind of numbers flying around, maybe it ends up being 40 with quite a number of add-ons tacked on top of that. And if you end up paying all of that, it's good. PSG sell it as a big sale. United sell it as a good sale with add-ons. I think that there is that flexibility, and I think that a lot of it is, Jorge Mendes, who represents him, who represents João Neves, who represents Euro, is moving his players, and he does what he does. And sometimes it gets a little bit messy, but in the end, I think we'll find. I think there's a deal to be made here that's not in this 70 million range for sure. That I think, and United believe that too, or they would have walked away by now. for sure.
Interesting. I want to ask you about Ugarte specifically as Mainu's kind of midfield partner, but we do have a super chat from random guy saying, "So who is the Hampson lad? No homer." I'm guessing he's on about yourself. I have no idea, but yeah, it's James.
Sure it's you. I'm sure it's you.
Either way, I'll take it. Yeah, either way, I'll take it. Yeah, just on Ugarte, James, opinions on him as a midfield partner for Mainu? Because there's been, again, some kind of conflicting opinions as well, haven't there?
Yeah, I really like him. I think that I have a not an old school view on these midfielders, but I think sometimes it goes over the line in terms of what people want out of a midfielder, where everybody has to be like, I say, like, people want a 10 who plays at 6 now. They've got to be creative. They've got to progress the play. They've got to carry like crazy. They've got to do all of that. And they got to get around and tackle, but they can't tackle too much. But they've got to shield it. But they've got to sit deep. I don't know what they want, you know? It's like, but people have always complained about those deep midfielders. I mean, Michael Carrick used to get a lot of criticism when he played. He was a great progressor of the play, but he wasn't mobile enough, you know, at the time, as it was considered in terms of covering around, right? There's always going to be things that people pick, like holes in players. When I look at it, I think I want to protect our back line. That we did not do last year. We did not have a combative midfielder who was protecting the back line. Casemiro was bypassed so easily.
Oh, God.
I want someone to do a lot of the hard yards defensively for Kobbie Mainoo so he doesn't have to do as much defensive work. He was struggling at certain points in the second half of last season with Casemiro, where there was just too much for him to try to do to make up the differences. And that isn't great for him, right? We saw with Amrabat in a partnership as a 2, even just Amrabat getting about defensively helped Kobbie Mainoo have a better game and freed him up more. So I want someone to do a lot of that defensive dirty work, those coverages. I also want somebody who's solid in possession and safe. I want someone safe. I don't care personally about progression. I want someone who is safe. Casemiro can progress the ball. If you watched the game last night, he was pinging him around.
That first time pass that he's got.
He can do it. The issue is when it doesn't work, the risks are huge, and it creates a lot of problems because it becomes very risky, and then he doesn't have the legs to make up for it when he turns the ball over right in the middle of the pitch, which did happen on a few occasions too. So it's like, it's too chaotic. The swings and the roundabouts are too much. I don't want peaks and valleys out of my 6. I want stability, and I think that's what Ugarte gives you. A lot of stability, a good defensive shield, good defensive work, will cover from other people, and is safe in possession. High percentage passing, is really good on the ball, carrying it. He's pretty press resistant in that regard. He's not going to be bullied off the ball. He can get through the defense, through the press. I don't need him progressing. Pass it to the fullbacks. Pass it to Kobbie Mainoo. We have really good fullbacks in terms of their possession principles. And even last night, as we saw, most of it came from the left side going back up the fullback interplay with the winger, and the winger's dropping in deeper. So I'd rather solve it other ways than have chaos at the 6. So I think he's a really good player in that regard.
The one thing that would concern me with Ugarte is the fact that PSG started not to trust him in the big games. So there's been a lot of suggestions that maybe someone like a Youssouf Fofana would be a better fit in that mould. I haven't seen enough of Fofana to kind of make a comment on that. I've seen quite a lot of Ugarte, and I am a fan. But I think regardless, whatever midfield option you go with, like you said, you're not going to get the perfect one in that sense. There's going to be little bits. You go to Zubamende, he's not going to cover as much grass as Ugarte is, or that, So there's going to
he's not nearly as combative.
No, exactly. Absolutely. I agree with that. So I'm interested to see if they do push for that deal, but it does seem slightly expensive in my opinion, but it is what it is.
It does. They need a good price, but he is and has been kind of the preferred player there. And, as long as they can get a deal done at the right price. And that's always the key with Ineos, right? It's got to be at the value that they agree to. They wanted Braithwaite, but once it goes over a value that they are good with, that doesn't mean they're just going to throw all the money at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose we can use a similar concept with the McTominay deal at the moment. Of course, we had a bid go in earlier this morning, I believe it was, a second one from Fulham. One question I wanted to ask, which I couldn't answer, a lot of people asking in the live show earlier on today. That money from McTominay, if that sale does go through, 25, 30 million, where's that money going to go?
It could practically go everywhere. I mean, that's the thing. It's a lot of profit, right? So I'll try to explain this really simply. Let's say that we got 25 million from McTominay.
Yeah.
If you buy a 50 million player, that only counts as 10 this year. So plus their wages, and that gives you some good flexibility. So it could allow you to buy a couple of players. Now, the thing you have to be wary of is, of course, you only get the sale one time. So next year, you're still going to pay for those players, but you don't have that sale profit, right? So you can't just go crazy. But I was discussing this morning as well, if it were me, if it was up to me, it makes the most sense as a plan. If you get that McTominay money, I would go for that loan on Ugarte, loan with obligation, and put the money towards the center back. And that way you get both. If Ugarte is available on loan, it makes it one of the more unique opportunities to fix your problems this summer, because then you could spend the money on a center back and push the purchase of Ugarte to next season. And you solve two problems there while splitting the money up, as I don't think you're going to get I don't think there's any other player right on the market right now at a potential loan of that quality at any position. I don't think there's any center back you could get on loan that would be as good as Ugarte is as a midfielder, for example. So that would be an interesting thing, but it will go to the midfield. We will buy a midfielder if Scott Mctominay is sold, but it may help us do more elsewhere also in the short term.
Are they also relying on someone like a Victor Lindelof to leave for a De Ligt to come through?
Yeah.
Is that another kind of stumbling block at the minute?
It would help because more the wages than the fee.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Awesome. Wan-bissaka, very quickly. What's the crack with that in a minute? You've got the Mazraoui kind of on pause, ready to go. That's a green light in terms of everything, but is West Ham's unwillingness to pay 15 million, which is absolutely fucking bonkers, if you ask me. With a year left in his deal, I know what people are saying, but this is a guy we paid 50 million quid for not too long ago. To not be paying 15, that's a fair price, right?
It is. And I think they will. But at the same time, like, here was the kind of the challenge in all of this, right? Is that if you remember last summer, we had an issue with West Ham on both the bids for McTominay and Maguire.
Yep.
The Maguire one got a lot closer, but what was the problem is that with his wages he was on and the contract they agreed, they wanted United to pay a bunch of money to Maguire to like pay his deal off. They didn't want to give him a good bonus. They didn't want to do that. So like you have to weigh up wages, transfer fee. And so they've agreed terms with Wan-bissaka, but I gather they've gone a bit above where they want to. And so like that shifts the balance a little bit in terms of so now they'll say, well, we've got to deal with him, but we can't pay you as much because we're going to pay his wages higher than we wanted because of what you gave him before. And so we have less money for the fee. It's true, but it's kind of bullshit at the same time. I mean, this is a bit of how West Ham do business that isn't particularly endearing. It isn't great. It's kind of like, I think it's a bit of a cheap way of doing business for a club that shouldn't have to operate that way, in my opinion. I mean, they're weird. West Ham have been weird to deal with for a long time with their ownership that they haven't. They've just been kind of a weird club to deal with. And they do some odd things. I think it'll get done now because that was the primary stumbling block before, was Wan-bissaka and the wages. And it would have happened already if not for that originally. But it seems like they're offering less on the deal now because they're giving him more in the wages. And they're going to have to move somewhere because, they have to move somewhere on that. I don't think United are going to be too stubborn on this, though, because the Mazraoui deal should be pretty easy. They still should make a small profit on the deal, given there's only, he's in his +1 year.
Yeah. And
it should cover everything. So I'm sure it'll happen. And part of the thing is that I would just wait until next week when they return. Because as we kind of saw last night, he still played. He's our only fit senior fullback. We have to kind of play him because we don't really have a choice. We can't just dump our preseason and have a bad preseason because of a transfer. I understand why people will say that, but it's like, here's the thing, right? If he got injured and he had to stay, they wouldn't consider it a disaster. You're not talking about a huge priority position. It's more the fact that he's going to be out of contract, and that's why we're looking at a cost replacement that's quite cheap. We need to have a good preseason. That's why he's playing. And but yeah, I do think this will happen. I think once they get back to the UK, it'll accelerate a bit there. But West Ham are weird. I mean, they are weird. They've done this before, and the whole Maguire thing fell through when it looked really close on a similar point as this.
Just a couple of things to pick up on that. Now, when Ineos were coming in, a lot of the talk was one aligned strategy, one aligned vision. We were going to go for certain players that fit the mold. And it was kind of, we're going to go away from just a manager bringing in players that, the old phone book that he's worked with, etc. You've seen players like Mazraoui, De Ligt, the Dutch connections as well. Are we actually going away from that? Is that not surprised you a little bit that we're going in for players that he's worked with again?
Yes and no. Because it's an open discussion, and I think that, for example, when De Ligt first came up, it was overstated, in my opinion, based on everything I'd heard in terms of how strongly they were pursuing him. And I made a point. I said, look, he's not the priority. He's not going to be the priority. They much prefer Braithwaite, who, he played for Rude, but there was nothing in that, right? And who cares, right? They've been watching Braithwaite for a long time. Last year, they liked Braithwaite. Lenny Yoro has no connection to him, right? And they said, if we can get one of these, we're spending the money there. And they did. They got Lenny Yoro. And as soon as they did that, the De Ligt thing died for 4 weeks now. It's been frozen. And even until this injury, people kind of maybe it's not going to happen. I'm not really sure. De Ligt is somebody that they've been following for a long time. But in the past, I think we would have said, all right, we've been following for a long time. Manager really likes him. Let's just get it done. He'll become our top choice because the manager likes him, and we'll pay whatever we can. Not the case now. He's a potential option at the right price, same as a few other players that they're looking at, right? With Mazraoui, it's an interesting one because I would again say that he's somebody that they'd actually had watched for quite some time, that they'd looked at for quite some time in the past. But it's more in that case, it's okay, there's a little bit of a difference here when you're talking about a depth player where you kind of need them to know what the manager needs of them pretty quickly if they're going to come in and play. I don't mind it there. It's okay if signing players you have familiarity with. I think that's more of an acceptable, in alignment with the vision. He's also just a modern fullback. I mean, there's Mazraoui kind of just... With fullbacks, it's he's a modern fullback. He probably fit in any system, to be fair. I can't think of any top club that wouldn't use a Mazraoui, as a fullback type of player. So it's all okay in that respect. But I think that they've got players the manager likes and is familiar with are backup plans, because it's well, if we can't get someone we want, we can't get who we need. If we can get one of these players that we do like, but who are not our preference, that has some familiarity with the manager at a really good price, then we'll do that. And that would be the backup plan.
I'm interested to see how this moves going forward because we've got, one game left of the US Tour? And then we've got City next Saturday, and the Premier League officially kicks off on the 16th against Fulham.
Yeah, Friday were the first game, right? Yeah.
So, a couple of questions on that. One, who's impressed you in particular? For me, I think Ahmad, Collier, Amas have all been stood out. What do you think's the plan is for Ahmad? Because you're looking at that right-hand spot at the minute. That's got to be his at the start of the season now, isn't it? Surely.
It does. And I think Ahmad for sure has been the standout every time he plays. And even dating back to last year, every time he played, it was good. He brings you something different. He probably has, at this point, the highest visible ceiling of the forwards that we have. Because he has so much in his tool set. And he's a very unique player. I think he's impressed the most. I think he has nailed down that right-hand spot. And I think partially because, Garnacho will be back now, today. He'll start training, but he's still going to be behind. A week of fitness versus 3-4 weeks of fitness is where he's going to be at. That's normal. That's okay. And so I think they'll say we've got a good option. We don't, and they'll compete. But I think we'll see way more rotation in the front line too next season. We have to, right?
I hope so.
We can't. They burn out so bad, these guys, and even when they're not getting injured, they burn out, and then they play through injuries. Both Garnacho and Rashford played through injuries for months last season. Little problems, things that prevent them from playing at their best. Well, you give them a week rest, 2 weeks rest, those injuries go away. With light training where they're not really out, but they're on the bench, then they're better. But who do you have to replace them in the past? Before it was like nobody. Anthony and Wheatley, maybe like there's no way. You just couldn't do it. So yeah. I think it'll be Ahmad. I think Rashford definitely had his best game last night. He looked fit, fast, sharp.
Very sharp.
Very, very sharp, very bright. And that was good to see. You wanted to see that with him. I think that the system suited him too. Actually, he was good when Højlund was on against Arsenal too. To be fair, that coming deep, the pass to him for the goal, some of the interplay was really good there.
When you have a left back as well as willing to overlap and put crosses in, which we didn't have all last season.
Correct, and that is a huge difference. Rashford, we know so much better when he has Luke Shaw. Harry Amas on the ball reminds me a lot of Luke Shaw. He has a lot of very, very similar traits. Yeah, very, very similar traits in how he gets up. And those interplays were vital. And Rashford, instead of sitting on a touchline, moving inside the fullback and then being able to run at players, but also having someone moving to pass. There was so much more. I mean, we got three. I know. Well, you do it. It's tough because you get real one dimensional, and then you try to force it, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and you get worse, and the confidence drops, and then you have a really bad season, which you did. But I think we had 3 or 4 low cutbacks from the left side between Amos and Rashford. One from Rashford, I think Ahmad should have scored. One from Amos that Ahmad did score, and a couple other good opportunities. One I think Eriksen probably should have shot first time. We were creating like real chances, like real football chances off of pattern play, not like out of nothing moments. These were real created chances. And that like maybe as a unit was the most exciting thing to me. That again, you get a left back out there, then Rashford can really do his best again, and that's the best way to get the most out of him. I did really like the false 9 system last night, though. I thought Sancho actually did a pretty decent job in it. I think his effort levels have been better. I think he did a good job simulating the setup. That it helped us retain possession. We were more. I don't know how I'd put it. I think that the system is, I guess, what I mean as what has stood out to me the preseason, because it's been a higher line, but we've been far less open at the same time in the midfield. That's been a standout thing.
That's what's been breathed quite a lot, though, isn't it? The fact that, they not openly said that, it doesn't matter if you finish 6th or 5th, but the actual playing style and patterns and pressing structure and all this kind of stuff. I've been really impressed with that. I'm really impressed with Mason Mount as well. It has to be said. I've not even mentioned it, but I think he's looked sharp. He's looked fresh.
Yeah, he has.
And you're looking at players like Bruno and Garnacho, who, last season starts every single game. I'm not suggesting that Bruno doesn't for any stretch of imagination, but when you have that competition, breeds success, pushes the levels up, and having Ahmad and having players like Mount and all these players perform like they're doing, I'm excited for the forward line. I'm just slightly worried about the defence. On the youngsters...
I think Bruno, if he played 1 game a week, would be better Bruno. If he only had to play 1 game a week, and that would be ideal.
Yeah, 100%. Just on the youngsters, Collier and Amas, I know you touched on him slightly. Expectations for this season?
I'm unsure. With Amas, I think his work, he's been rewarded. There's been really good feedback on him about his taking the chance. Murray started the preseason because it felt he was more physically ready. I think it was what it was. And to be fair, in the first couple of games, almost looked kind of off it, a little bit slow, a little bit behind the pace.
A little bit off.
Yeah. But he's been better and better, and the more he's playing, the better it's getting. And you're seeing why he was highly rated. I think he's working his way into potentially staying around the first team, where If you sign a Mazraoui who can cover both sides, you could keep Amos in there as coverage too, and then see where you're at, and that may stop you from having to sign a left back.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Got too excited.
And then yeah, and then on Collier, I'm not as I think he's been decent. I think that like the feedback that I've gotten on him is less convincing. Like,
oh really?
They want to see what he can do. I'm not saying he's been bad at all, but he's also, he's 20, right? He is more physically ready, but I don't think they're quite sold on a lot of the other characteristics he brings to the table as of yet.
Do you think the
on ball passing, things like that
hurts him slightly? Because that's what everyone's going to go towards, isn't it?
It does, and from the discussions I had, they said specifically, look, he's not a Kobbie Mainoo prospect. He's not that level of player. And I think, I was doing a live stream earlier, and I had people saying like, Collier will start. No, he won't. He absolutely will not be our starting midfielder next year. I guarantee that. He is. Yeah, he probably at this point. I mean, but like of the team right now, even if we sign nobody else, Collier is not starting the season next year, and I would doubt he starts many games, if any, next season at the 6. I think he could come off the bench. I think he could be rotation, maybe in some cup games, but I don't know. I think there's a real chance that, especially if we make a signing, I think he'll go on loan or in some kind of deal. Like if we sign an Ugarte and we have Ugarte and Casemiro at 6, I think Collier goes on loan. I don't, or even gets sold with one of these like buybacks and sell-ons, because he's 20. He's got to play football. That's kind of the issue you have with someone his age. He's got to start playing regularly at the first team level if he's going to develop the things he's lacking. I'm not saying he won't be a good player down the road, but he's not there. They don't see him that way. The issue is he going to play enough? If it's just a bit part role, very rarely underneath other players to actually develop. I don't think so.
I mean, like you said, you start getting to that age 20, you need football. He's not 16, 17, you need regular football. So that is an interesting point. A lot of people seem to be happy with him, his performances, but I'm
not. It's that exact problem. He needs to play to develop, and he's not going to play enough for us yet.
Yeah, agreed. We're going to get into how we think the starting lineup just to finish the show by the start of the season. I want to talk about that. Just before I do, make sure everyone who's in the chat, if you can just get a question in for James towards the end, we'll just do like a quick fire kind of thing. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, please do. I know Random Guy gifted a membership before. I think that was to T2 Izzo. So hopefully you enjoy that kind of content. And he's just done another one. So Patrick eBay was gifted a membership as well. So thank you very much for that, Random Guy. Absolute legend. And smash a like on the video if you can as well. Yeah, so start the Premier League season, James. What are we thinking? Fulham, Old Trafford. How do you see that starting lineup based off what you've seen so far, based on the injuries? How do you see it going?
Yeah.
Or even you can go for the City game if you want.
No, we could. I mean, I think Fulham and City will probably be pretty similar. But I would say, Rashford, Xerxes, Ahmad, I think will start up front.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just because they're the most ready, they're there, they're healthy, they're the most ready, right? I think Garnacho's really the only other player who's in contention, but I think he's a few weeks behind. I would say Bruno's going to start no matter what. I think Kobbie Mainoo will be fine. I think he'll be ready as well. He's keeping himself in good shape. He'll be ready. And then I'm going to say Ugarte. Wow. I'm going to make that prediction and say we do get it over the line and he plays. The thing is, if we sign him, he's a very, very fit player. He's a very, very fit player. He's very robust. He will play. Yeah. He's not going to need too much of a warm-up. He's also a player I don't know if you watched the Copa America, this is just one positive on Ugarte. He had a moment where people were saying he's definitely got a torn ACL. Nothing out of it. Leg bent backwards. The guy is like Bruno levels of not getting injured over his career, which is actually quite a good thing. The sporting players, it's like that availability cannot be necessarily underrated, especially with what we've dealt with,
Absolutely.
That is a positive. So I would say him. I'm just going to give that. I made a prediction one time on your channel some months ago. I said, I think one of Sancho or Greenwood will be here next season. And I'm thinking I'm going to end up being right about that in the end. despite everything, that Sancho will still be here. I didn't think I was going to be right a couple months ago on that. I thought there's no way this is over, right? But anyway, Ugarte, Kobe, and Bruno. And then I'll say Shaw, Lissandro, Maguire, and Dallo and Onana. I think the back five picks itself pretty clearly. We may make a signing at center back, as we know. I'm not saying we won't. Braithwaite, if somehow we were able to get him, hasn't been playing for the last bit of time for Everton for I don't know what the reason is. And De Ligt has not even returned. Yeah, right, exactly. Transferitis, I know. And De Ligt has not returned to training yet, so I think they'll be behind. And I think it's going to be Maguire and Lissandro starting the season. So and the rest I think are picking themselves. Dallo is very fit; he'll be ready for the season start. Shaw should be ready. I mean, he should be ready. He should be ready. We also don't have another left back, so I think he will be playing.
I'm looking at it though. I'm thinking it's going to be a laggy start to the season. The injuries: Yoro, Rasmus. Lissandro coming back, not training with the team on the tour. Xerxes, I know he's arrived at Carrington, but you can individualize it and you can go through all the players and you're like, they're not really gelled together as of yet as a team. So I feel like August is going to be a little bit of a rough month, and then
it will be tricky.
The progression throughout September. Right, I'll get into the questions and then we can kind of finish off on this. Macmillan saying, James, do you think United may go all in for Branthwaite using the McTominay cash and possibly Lindelof cash? Seems to me De Ligt isn't very much a must. Seems Ineos are very keen on Branthwaite. And can I personally just add to that as well? I will put my neck on the line with this. I don't see Branthwaite happening at all. At all.
I think there's a really low chance of it happening. Yeah. I think they might try again, though, in terms of answering that question, because they really, really do like him. But I'm so not sold that they'll get De Ligt in, to be honest. I just am not sold because...
That surprises me. Because they've agreed personal terms as well, and everything seems to be there. So it surprises me a bit, that.
I'm just not sold, like just from all the things that I've heard. I'm not saying it won't happen.
Yeah.
I'm really not. I'm just very much not sold on it happening because it's they wanted a left-sided center back. I've just and it's hard for me to see them compromising on that belief. Just the way they've operated, it's hard for me to see them compromising. Once they got Euro, and again, I don't think they're gonna sign. Like if they weren't, like I said before, if they weren't gonna sign De Ligt, the Euro injury isn't gonna make them sign De Ligt. They're still gonna be looking at a left-sided center back and saying Maguire will be fine for 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks of the season. We can manage that. That's my feeling. So I'm not saying it won't happen because obviously it still could. They're still interested. But I think they're still more likely to try for a different center back first and see if something could happen there before signing De Ligt. And then again, the price. They won't buy him at 50 million euros plus add-ons that Bayern are asking for. It has to come down.
I seen your friend, you obviously do the podcast with Phil before on X, he put something about they're trying to buy Jonathan Tah for like 20 million or something, and then they're trying to sell
It's weird, right?
Like,
yeah, it's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird. It is a good point. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Sam actually is in the chat saying, James, is there a way to sell players with the legacy of leftover high wages by the Glazers? Seems to be the biggest stumbling block for us.
It does. It's the problem it's why it's difficult to move Lindelof, for sure. He's on high wages. McTominay's on all right wages, but he's also a player who wants a raise on his next deal. It makes it more difficult for others, and is part of the reason why they wouldn't be sold. Like you take Jadon Sancho, he could still be sold if an offer came in. He doesn't have to stay, but it's going to be hard for anybody to buy him. And we don't want to pay his wages for him not to play. They've made that pretty clear. We want to be able to use him. So that is a challenge because if it weren't for the wages, you'd probably see them more actively shopping Sancho around because you could get a better fee for him with lower wages. Antony is not just a loss in terms of cost, but wages. I mean, it is to sell or move on Antony is impossible. It is impossible. You're taking huge losses in that case. So yeah, I mean, because he's on pretty decent sized wages too. So yeah, Casemiro as well. If he was on 100K, it'd be easy to shift Casemiro.
But it's a common trend there, right? Because you've got
Yeah.
Casemiro we bought for 60. What's he worth now? 20? 25? Wan-bissaka bought for 50, selling for 15.
Yep.
You can go through the whole team and you're like, Maguire, 80
Yep.
million, probably worth 25 now.
It's
mad the amount of money they've basically shit away in the previous regime.
Yep.
It is crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yep.
Do you think we get a new centre-back and is Chalobah a more likely option compared to De Ligt?
And that's an interesting option. They haven't made any contact with him to make a signing. I asked about that a long time ago, and they said maybe late in the window. Chalobah's kind of flexible, which may be to his benefit, but at the same time, given that we're signing a right back in Mazraoui, most likely, I would say no, because I think that's one of the positives that that Chalobah brought to the table, so he can cover on the right as well. So I don't think we need him as much if we're signing Mazraoui. There hasn't really been much movement on there, but I wouldn't erase it from our minds as a backup plan because he's affordable and he's a decent player. He's better than people have given him some credit for. If you're not signing him to be a starter, I wouldn't sign him to be a starter, but as coverage, I think he's actually a pretty good player. He's done all right for Chelsea and he is pretty flexible.
Yeah. I have to admit, the way this summer's gone at the minute, if you would have said this to the start at June, what's happened has gone through with the injuries, the players we're signing, the players we're linked with, I would have been like, I have no idea this was coming. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm happy with Xerxes, I'm happy with Yoro, and I'll certainly be happy if we get Ugarte done before the league starts. So praying that happens. Just very quickly, whilst I've got everyone, someone gifted memberships before. There's a video dropping tomorrow on Chido Obi Martin, what type of player he is, how he's kind of developed through Arsenal's academy, and why United have gone for him. So any members in the chat, that'll be dropping tomorrow for you guys. James, what are we up to over the next couple of weeks or so before the Premier League? Anything popping up?
Not too much exciting. Just back to the normal, and obviously the team will be back after this weekend, and then all in lead up to the Community Shield and the start of the season. There'll probably be some closed door games, but no, just my usual for me, just the usual videos and content and things like that. I'm hoping to work with the club a little more directly on a few things, which I think they're open to. It's one thing I want to say, just spreading a little more positivity, is there's just a lot more openness from United in terms of their connection with us as fans, and as people covering the club and YouTube, and just whatever. It's a totally different atmosphere when you're there in some of these other spaces, where last year I remember being on the tour and it was like you feel like you're at odds with the club at all times, like you're the enemy and they're
Very
hiding
split,
from you.
wherever you look.
Very split. Exactly. Not like that anymore. It is very different, and I do think that will have an effect on things. But anyway, I think it opens the door to a lot more possibility, as fans for things that we can see, we can do, under these new owners, and hopefully for people who cover the club and do videos and things like that, more opportunities as well there.
Yeah. Preach. I will absolutely preach that. Manchester United. United is in the name, and you've individually have always been absolutely amazing to us, and always happy to jump on and share your expertise and stuff. So really appreciate that, James. Let's see what the season shall bring us. Thank you to everyone in the chat as well who's been getting involved with your opinions. If you're not subscribed to James' channel, please go and do. If you're a member of our channel, go check him out on X as well for regular updates. We'll see you at some point, I imagine towards the end of the summer or something, James, whilst we're missed in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
Awesome. Right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to James once again, and we'll see you guys tomorrow for the 12 o'clock show. See you in a bit.